talks about how teaching children that our emotions are just emotions. They simply are. They're not valid or invalid or good or bad.
I like feelings aren't facts. Something that I
Oh,
like.
that's very nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because you feel
Like that
something
one.
doesn't necessarily make it true. And feelings change.
Yes. And the D is for describe, don't preach, and which I think we've kind of talked about a little bit already. And then I is involve your child in the discipline. So if there is a time where there's could get some kind of retribution or from it or learn from it. For example, maybe if they draw on the wall to get some cleaner and start to draw or start to clean the drawing up. Or I think he gave an example too of if they're doing their homework after dinner and you see that that's not working, like, hey, can we talk about this? This is not working. But kind of let them have a say in when they could do their homework or when they think it might be a better time.
And we've asked my son before, what do you think the consequence should be? And some kids would say, oh, a loss of $5 or whatever, whenever it's much more monetarily valuable than that. And even if you don't take that child up on that offer of allowing them to just decide the consequence, it at least gives them the voice in it. And so sometimes I'll say, well, I don't think that fits, or do you think that's really, equal to what happened? And I may or may not use that, but at least it gives him an opportunity to express what he feels like it should be.
Yes, gives them a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then the R is reframe a no into a conditional yes. And Dr. Siegel gives an example of if a child wants to stay longer at Nana's house, sure, we can visit Nana, but let's can we come back next week or this weekend? Do you have time this weekend? But right now we have to go. So trying to maybe let them know that this is a possibility in the future kind of helps them to understand in the moment.
Just giving them that little speck of hope even. I really liked the 3 questions that they talked about instead of lecturing, which is what I tend to do, and lecture and even say, well, I did this or whatever, but the 3 questions from kind of what I gathered is to ask, I wonder why you're having a hard time with this right now. What do I want to teach and how can I best teach it? And I think that's just really applicable in any situation that you're in. I know, like I said, I like to lecture and no one listens to that, so and learns from it.
And I think that also helps, like you were saying, just to keep from being so reactive in the moment too, because you're actually thinking about what do I want my child to get out of this or learn from this issue or this situation.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because when I was looking at this, I remember the first principal that I ever worked for asked me what the definition of discipline is, and I said punishment, which was the wrong answer, of course, this is many years ago. And he said, no, Ms. Miller, it's actually teaching. And that was a big eye-opener for me, and like I said, that was many years ago, but related to that, I like these 3 questions here on page 7, talking about the pause before we respond. You should ask yourself these 3 questions. First, why did my child act this way? 2, what lesson do I want to teach in this moment? And 3, how can I best teach this lesson? And that kind of goes along with the idea of discipline as teaching instead of punishment, which is maybe what we want to do when we're angry, but we should never be angry in that moment. So I really like the idea of teaching and asking yourselves these questions.
He also talks about can't versus want, and is it that the child can't or they just want to do something, and he gives the example of a child running errands with a parent for a couple hours. They're automatically going to be frustrated at times, get hungry or get cranky, and so kind of taking that into consideration. Chapter 2, your brain on discipline, and Dr. Siegel talks about the 3 C's of the brain. that the brain is constantly changing. It's changeable and it's also complex. So, and that kind of talks about what we were thinking or speaking about earlier, how a brain is very malleable. It can change. And then he also talks about, I love how he talks about the upstairs brain versus the downstairs brain, and how a parent actually has a remote control for which part of the brain that they want to engage. And one of his phrases is engage, not enrage. So if you are in the, and I like to also talk about the 3 R's when I visit with parents. The first one is regulate. So if a child, you can tell, is maybe in the downstairs brain, they need help with just some breathing and telling them, hey, I'm here with you, you're safe. And then relational is the second one, and that's kind of more midbrain, where they really want you to listen to them and they want to be heard. And then the last one is reasoning, and that's where you can actually have a conversation with them about what happened and then what they could do in the future.
I know it takes me a little while to get to that point where I'm ready to talk about something that just happened or something that in a logical way, you know. And so, yeah, kids are very similar in that aspect.
And I wanted to make a point with just what you said, Ms. Foster, that when you do need a pause, that kind of teaches, I think, the child too, that sometimes adults need to take a little time and they need to take a break. So I think that was an important point.
Absolutely.
The E is for emphasize the positive. So like if any likens this to if a child is whining, you know, you might say, I want to listen to you, I want to hear you, but tell me in your big boy voice. And then creativity, or excuse me, the taking a creative approach to each situation instead of just, and that goes back to, I think, being responsive instead of reactive, and really thinking about how a situation can help or hurt, or a response can help or hurt. And the last one is T is for teach mindset tools, and that's the long-term, I think, part of no drama discipline is trying to teach them skills for life.
Definitely, so that we raise responsible adults from the children that we are influencing. And just it reminded me so much of a small impoverished town I was teaching at in rural Missouri, and we were taking them to a water park, which was only about an hour from the location, a little over an hour. And some of the kids saw a large body of water, and they said, "Oh my gosh, Miss Foster, is that the ocean?" And of course, you know, Missouri is extremely landlocked, and we had only been on the bus for a few minutes, and it just resounded to me that it just really reminded me that the kids only know what they've seen and what they've experienced and what they, you know, and I could teach them all day long about the ocean and how far it is and how long of a drive it would take. And so it was really just a reminder that kids have to see things to learn about them and experience them to make that connection in the brain that they'll remember and actually learn from. So I always remember that. It was really eye-opening.